Good evening, all of you, my dear friends and my seniors. It's a great day for ENT and the Indian Medical Association and the Association of Otolaryngologists of Trichy. This our endowment lecture. It's a jointly organized endowment lecture for great legends, I will not speak much about them because Dr. Sendil sir, our Secretary IMA sir, he will speak more on it, and it's a great day for all of us. I welcome you all. Please join this great oration day, and there are wonderful speakers here. We all will have a wonderful time. Let's start the session. I hand over the mic to Dr. Sendil sir, IMA Secretary, Trichy branch.
Good evening, everyone. We'll start this good evening with a physician's prayer. Dear Lord, thou great physician, I kneel before thee. Since every good and perfect gift must come from thee, I pray. Give skill to my hands, clear vision to my mind, kindness and sympathy to my heart. Give singleness of purpose and strength to lift at least part of the burden of my suffering fellow men, and a true realization of the privilege that is mine. Take from my heart all guile and worldliness, that with the simple faith of a child, I rely on thee. I am a prayer. May everybody be happy, and may every one of us see to it that nobody suffers from any pain or sorrow. I do not ask for crown, nor I wish to be in heaven or reborn. I only want to alleviate the suffering of those people who are burning in the fire of sorrow. Over to Dr. Vijay.
I would request Dr. A. Venugopal sir, the President AOI Trichy branch, to give welcome address.
Respected President, Dr. Gunasekharan, Tiruchirappalli branch IMA, respected Secretary, Dr. Sindhivel Kumar, Secretary of Tiruchirappalli branch, and respected Dr. Gnanathalagan sir, and also my friend, dear friend Javahar, senior colleagues and friends. I'm extremely happy to invite you for this webinar, weekly program of this endowment lectures from MERF. They are they are very busy. When we invited, immediately they accepted to give the lectures. Dr. Sindhil Vadivu for Dr. Ananthagiri Memorial Endowment Lecture, and Dr. Sudha Mageshwari for Dr. V. Navanetra Krishnan Endowment Lecture. And I hope the lectures will be a feast to the academicians and also very useful for general practitioners as well as other faculty members. I welcome you all, and also I wish to tell a few words about the MERF Hospital. MERF for past 25 years, they are doing very good work and academic and research at Madras City. It was founded by Padma Shri Professor S. Rameswaran, whose son Dr. Mohan. Incidentally, he's my classmate, and he is also directing and doing a very fantastic work in the department, academic, scientific, and also service in the field of cochlear implant, service to the people, and also academic work he is doing in an excellent way. By the few words, I request and I welcome the guest lecturers Dr. Sudha Mageshwari and Sendil Vadivu to deliver the endowment lectures. Thank you. You're all welcome for the oration, please.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I'd request Dr. Gunasekharan sir to give inaugural address, who is the President IMA Trichy branch.
Good evening, everyone. Respected the President of AOI, Dr. Venugopal, the Secretary, Dr. Javahar, the important person in the ENT #1, in Trichy, Dr. Jnanathalagan, Dr. Vijay Krishnan, who is coordinating today's meeting, Dr. Sudha Mageshwari, and Dr. Sendil Vadivu, who came forward to give an important lectures today in the name of our senior members who we lost, but they are the primary persons, leaders of our IMA and also in the AOI. Both the leaders, especially Dr. Anandagiri and Dr. Navneetha Krishnan, both are our past presidents in the IMA as well as in the ENT Association. They strive hard to bring up this association to the present level, and they worked for the academic program also. I remember that for many years, the programs, especially initially Dr. Navneetha Krishnan Endowment Lecture and later the Anandagiri Dr. Endowment Lecture has been created by AOI, which has been coordinated with the IMA because both the leaders belong to both the association. Today, we are having the lectures for the common practitioners. Our day-to-day topic, every day we are seeing the headache and also the dizziness. So both the topics will be useful for not only for the ENT surgeons, it is very much useful for the general practitioners and IMA members. With these few words, I welcome today's guest speakers, Dr. Sudha Mageshwari and Dr. Sendil Vadivu, for coming forward to inaugurate this session and happily inaugurate this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Now I would request Dr. Jnanathalagan sir and Dr. Palaniappan sir to award gold medal presentations to meritorious undergraduate students.
Medal,
No problem, Vijay. Thank you.
Thanks,
first
sir.
rank holder.
Yeah.
Sir, first, yeah. He stood first, sir. Hello. Thank you. Hello.
Palaniappan sir.
Sir, her name is Vigna, sir. She stood first and she got 85 marks, sir, out of 100.
Excellent.
So she stood first in the examination, sir.
Very good.
She is from KAPV Government Medical College, Vigna, sir.
What you can say?
And another important thing, she is a close relative of our doctor, sir, IMA Dr. Sundaram. You know Dr. Sundaram from Trichy. She is the relative, sir. So Vigna is, she scored first marks, 85.
Very
And
good.
yes, second mark was trained by Sashina. She is from Kerala, sir. Sashina Fatima. She has got 84 marks. 84 marks. Because of this corona period, she is not able to come. On behalf of her, our student representative, Dr. Rajeshwar, he is here. So he is going to receive this medal, sir. And this is a second prize medal. Dr. Rajeshwar is getting, sir.
Thank
Sashina, she has got 84 marks out of 100. Only 1 mark difference, sir. Only 1 mark. 85 first mark and 84 second marks.
Great, sir.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have to thank the AOI as well as IMA. I have to thank Venugopal sir, President of AOI, and I have to thank Dr. Sendil Vadivel sir, President of IMA, and Guna sir, for all the people we are thanking from KAPV Medical College. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Dr. Palaniappan, wonderful.
Sir,
Thank you.
Guna sir, thanks. Thanks, sir.
No
No problem. Sir, thanks, sir. Jawahar sir, thanks, sir. And Vijay, great. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And Sudha and Vadivu, they are our friends, sir. And important thing, Sudha is doing genetic works in the cochlear plantation, sir. And Vadivu is also very famous, sir. She is the wife of our Vijay, sir. And both are leading ENT surgeons working in MERF Foundation, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So now I would request Dr. Jawahar Nasundram sir to take over the session for the endowment lecture, and I would request him to introduce the speakers.
Good evening, all of you. It's a great honor to introduce Dr. Sudha Maheshwari and Dr. Vadivu. They are known to me for many, many years. I had worked with them and in MERF, and they are wonderful ENT surgeons. And naturally, when they are working in MERF, they have to be on the edge so that they are always above the rest of the crowd. Sudha heads the Department of Community Otolaryngology, Madras ENT Research Foundation. She has completed her doctoral research in genetics in hearing loss, because MERF does a lot of work and they do a lot of cochlear implants. They must have done thousands of cochlear implants. So in that, they have, Sudha has taken up genetics. What is the cause for the hearing loss and congenital hearing loss in South Indian population? She has done her PhD in that. That's wonderful. And she's a recipient of Sandra D'Souza Gold Medal Award, and also AOI Gold Medal. I think she received with me at Kodaikanal, I remember, with the Adamu Gold Medal. And she's also received a senior ENT IO Indian Association of Otolaryngology and Head and Neck Surgery Gold Medal. And she also won the medal from CG, that is Cochlear Implant Group of India. So she has not left any medal without reaching her. She has got everything. Congrats to Dr. Sudha. Secondly, she had visited the US on invitation. She received an invitation from the American Academy, international invitation chair. She had an award as well as an observership in the United States, both in New York and in Loyola Medical University at Chicago. She worked in both the places and she was given an award like Travel Fellowship Award. So she has got a very vast experience in knowledge in otology, laryngology, and audiology. And she is an invited guest faculty in the Asia Pacific Conference held at Cyprus. And she was also an invited guest faculty in China. That is, she was, what is that? The day conference on Dalian China. I'm not able to see that. She was an invited guest faculty in China. It's a great honor. You know how Chinese behave. In spite of that, she's been invited in both the places, Cyprus, and she's given a lecture. And several noted publications, both nationally and internationally. And also she's a daughter of a great ENT surgeon, Dr. Soundarajan of Pattukotte. Now let's honor Dr. Sudha with the medal and appreciation. I call upon all the senior members, the IMA president, IMA secretary, Venugopal sir, all of them to honor Sudha, Dr. Sudha Maheshwari, senior consultant, Madras ENT Research Foundation, our certificate and the medal and the memento to her for her great lecture, which she's going to deliver right now. Back to Sudha.
Thank you so much, sir, for the kind introduction. First of all, I feel it's my sincere duty to express my heartfelt gratitude to the IMA and AOI Tiruchirappalli branch for having given me such a fine opportunity. Any day, it's a great honor delivering an endowment lecture. And let me first deliver a short felicitatory note about Dr. Navanitha Krishnan. And he was a great human being, apart from being a distinguished medical professional. And he has pioneered micro-ear surgery in Trichy and surrounding regions. He happens to be the first recipient of Professor P.V. Cherian Medal in 1969. And even after his retirement, his passion for community work continued. So he used to visit Dindikal and Manapare for service in all those days. So indeed, it's a privilege for having got a chance to deliver his endowment lecture. And thank you once again. And a very special and big thanks to Jawahar sir for making this possible. Thank you once again, sir. On to the top now, headache management, a rational approach. So headache, as all of us know, is one of the most common public health concerns worldwide and affecting people of all ages and races. And headache, it's not only a painful condition, it's quite disabling also. And according to WHO estimates, headache disorders collectively rank among the third highest among the disabling disorders contributing to the global disease burden. And headache is also one of the most frequently encountered symptom in general practice. Coming to the types of headache, according to the International Classification of Headache Disorders, the third edition, all the headache disorders are grouped under three broad categories. We have the primary headache disorders, in which there is no structural or metabolic abnormality. And we have a group of secondary headache disorders in which headache is a symptom of a very serious underlying condition. And then we have the painful cranial neuropathies. Coming to the primary headaches, the common types of primary headaches include the migraine, tension headache, and cluster headache. And other types of primary headache disorders are grouped like this. We have headaches which are increased on exertion. So in those categories, we have the primary cough headache and exercise headache, and also this primary thunderclap headache, which can be very annoying, the worst kind of a headache anybody can face in one's lifetime. It comes with a sudden pain anywhere in the head. It's excruciating, intense. It lasts for 5 minutes. So that's, again, the trigger can be anything, trauma, violent cough, sneeze, anything, And then we have headaches which are initiated by external stimuli. And those categories, we have the cold stimulus headache and the external pressure headache and the primary stabbing headache. And then we have a kind of epicranial headache, so which could be a nummular headache, and even primary stabbing headache is kind of an epicranial headache. And then among the miscellaneous categories, we have the hypnic headache, otherwise it's called as an alarm clock headache. Patient even wakes up during sleep due to this headache, even though it's very rare. And then we have the new daily persistent headache. And among the secondary headache disorders, we have a whole number of etiologies, the common being trauma, vascular, which can be either cranial or cervical. We have non-vascular conditions like infection, tumors, substance abuse or withdrawal, and psychogenic headaches. And secondary headache disorders, the extracranial conditions, we have cyanogenic etiology, otological etiology, ocular etiology, and TM joint arthralgia contributing to headache. Among the intracranial causes, we have the subarachnoid hemorrhage, cerebral venous thrombosis, vasculitis, dissection, carotid and vertebral artery dissection, and we have idiopathic intracranial hypertension. And among the metabolic causes, we have hypoxia and hypercapnia, both can contribute to headache. And obstructive sleep apnea headaches. These are one of the common associations like headache with sleep apnea, because patients with sleep apnea will have many apneic episodes throughout the night. And on account of which either they stop breathing for a few seconds or they go in for a shallow breathing, and together it results in hypoxia. So the patient gets up in the morning, he'll have an early morning headache. So this is a classical obstructive sleep apnea headache. Usually it resolves in a course of time. And again, a high altitude headache is again caused due to hypoxia. And diving headache is mostly due to carbon dioxide accumulation. It's a hypercapnic headache. And we have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and congestive cardiac failure, both by their metabolic derangements contributing to headache through hypoxia. And coming to the common medical conditions causing headache, we know like time memorial, we have hypertension and hypoglycemia contributing to headache. Even altered thyroid profile and anemia can be contributing factors. But of late, headache is found to be the fifth common symptom of COVID-19 infection. And recent data suggests that almost 13% of patients infected with COVID have suffered headache. And it ranks fifth among the symptoms apart from fever, cough, myalgia, and breathlessness. And it's commonly seen in patients with COVID of late. And now coming to history taking. So the main objective of a good comprehensive history taking should be to differentiate a benign headache from a life-threatening etiology. So this should be the crux of the history taking. And history should include, any history of trauma was there in the past, and all concurrent medical conditions like hypo or hyperthyroidism, diabetes, hypertension, especially history of tuberculosis, any immunocompromised state, pregnancy, whether they are on any medications, and whether there are any associated psychological issues. And onset of headache can always provide us a clue to the diagnosis. If it's of a very sudden and severe onset, then it's suggestive of life-threatening condition like either of subarachnoid hemorrhage, meningitis, vascular malformations, or it could be an intracranial tumor or metastasis. If it's gradual or chronic, it's suggestive of migraine or a tension headache. And especially if the age of onset of headache, new onset of headache after the age of 50 is always a red flag. It could be a sign of a stroke or any brain tumor. So that always we have to be as clinicians on the high alert. New onset of headache, especially over the age of 50. And also the periodicity. Suppose if the headache, it's early morning, it's severe, then it regresses, then again at the end of the day, it progresses. This is a kind of a sinogenic headache, where as you all can see, maxillary sinus has a non-dependent drainage. So early morning, when patient gets up due to accumulation, there is headache. And throughout the course of the day, the drainage is achieved. And then at the end of the day, again, there is a headache. Whereas frontal sinus, it has a dependent drainage. So usually the patient suffer an office headache if there is a frontal sinus infection. The patient wakes up mostly without pain because of adequate drainage, because the sinus has a dependent drainage, and they'll develop pain after a few hours, which can last throughout the day. And now, localization of pain can also give us adequate clue for the diagnosis. Sinogenic headache, we should always look for sinus tenderness, either maxillary tenderness or frontal tenderness. Tension headache, it's a kind of squeezing or a banding type of headache. Migraine and clusters are classically unilateral, and especially cluster, it's concentrated around one eye. Hypertensive headache, and also a headache due to sphenoid sinusitis, mostly we have an occipital headache. Stress-induced headache, it's like a tight banding headache around the crown of head, and a cervicogenic headache can occur at the back of the head and the neck. And if it's a TM joint arthritis pain, pain will be felt at the temples and in front of the ears. So the localization of pain, where it's exactly, can also add to the clinical diagnosis. So then the duration, whether it is continuous or intermittent. If it is continuous, actually, the diagnosis leads to a kind of a tension headache or a mid-facial segment pain or atypical facial pain or an analgesia-dependent headache. If it's constant, severe, unilateral, progressive, you should bear in mind the possibility of a tumor. And sinogenic pains are always intermittent, as we have seen, and migraine is classically episodic. That's a characteristic of a migraine headache. And the exclusive character and severity of each headaches among the primary headaches. Migraine is always unilateral. It's a kind of a throbbing pain. Patient will have aura visual disturbances. Patient can have nausea and extremely sensitive to light and sound. There's photophobia and phonophobia can be inherent factors in migraine. And then tension headache, it's a kind of a squeezing or banding around the head. It's actually triggered by stress. Sinogenic pain, usually it's felt as a pressure headache associated with facial pain. We can have pain around the cheeks, just above the eyebrows, And cluster headache. Usually cluster headaches are unilateral, concentrated around the eye. Either they are orbital or supraorbital. In association, there is sweating of forehead, lacrimation on the ipsilateral side. There could be even ptosis. If it's an allergic headache, it's usually on the top of the head, usually accompanied by rhinorrhea, sneezing, or watering of eyes. And exertional headaches can occur anywhere in the head. And the common trigger factors. For migraine, we'll see everything in detail. We have certain footsteps, stress, light, sound, sleep disruption, anything can trigger migraine. Cluster headache, a classical stimulant is alcohol. Temporomandibular joint pain, usually triggered by chewing. And trigeminal neuralgia and myofascial pain, there are certain trigger points, and they can even be triggered by air currents. And intracranial pathologies, usually the headache worsens on exertion, bending over, coughing, or any kind of a physical stress aggravates a headache due to intracranial pathology. So sinogenic pain, usually it's relieved by medical treatment. Migraine, the patients will want a quiet and a darkened room. That alleviates the pain, at least momentarily. And the common associated signs and symptoms the clinicians can pick up along with headache. That will also give us a clue for diagnosis. Cluster headache, usually it's lacrimation or nasal congestion. Migraine, aura may precede, and then it's associated with photophobia, phonophobia, nausea, vomiting. And in complicated migraines, patients can present even with seizures or focal deficits. Sinus-related headaches, usually there will be an associated nasal discharge, nasal obstruction, loss of smell. If it's otological, we should look for any ear discharge, hearing loss. If it's ocular, usually in glaucoma, there can be a very severe headache. And neurogenic headache is always associated with neurological symptoms like a numbness, weakness of limbs, focal deficits, and so on. So the associated signs and symptoms will give us a clue for secondary headache disorders. And as clinicians, any one of us should have a high index of clinical suspicion, especially to pick up secondary headache disorders. And clinical evaluation in a headache, of course, start off with the vital signs, and it requires a complete comprehensive ENT head and neck examination, including palpation of the head and face, look for sinus tenderness, and a complete ophthalmic examination, and then palpation of ipsilateral temporal artery for tenderness. So this will give us a clue for temporal arteritis diagnosis. We have to palpate the TM joint. Cervical spine palpation is also required, and a complete neurological examination is also needed. So altogether, headache management is based on a multidisciplinary approach. So this is a key for diagnosis. So it's actually a teamwork. If there's no pathology in one area, then always, we should never hesitate for referral. And investigations, of course, in the OP setup, we can do a nasal endoscopy, which we can rule out sinusitis, acute sinusitis, automicroscopic examination to look at the status of the ear, laboratory testing whenever required, and complete blood profile, in cases of systemic or intracranial infections. And ESR will give us a clue for raised ESR, temporal arteritis, and giant cell arteritis, and lumbar puncture when indicated. Imaging. So when to do an imaging in case of a headache? And whenever there is a recent, very significant change in the pattern, frequency, or severity, then it actually warrants a imaging. And if the patient is not responding to medications, if the headache worsens despite therapy, then that's also an indication for imaging. And definitely when there are any focal neurological signs or symptoms, and a headache which increases with exertion, cough, which are which will lead us to a diagnosis of intracranial pathology and orbital bruit, especially as we have seen already, red flag, new onset of headache after the age of 40, pediatric migraine. So all these conditions necessitate imaging. And among the imaging modalities, of course, we have the gold standard CT, MRI, and angiography to clinch the diagnosis. And hemorrhage, vascular reasons, can be picked up easily by CT. And among the vascular causes, we have subarachnoid hemorrhage, aneurysm, and reversible vasoconstriction syndrome or pituitary apoplexy. Okay, and CT-MR can pick up any parenchymal hemorrhage or parenchymal edema. So it's extremely useful investigations. And coming to migraine. So migraine, we have too many types of migraines. We have classical migraine, common migraine, ophthalmoplegic migraine, basilar migraine, and hemiplegic migraine. Classical migraine is one which occurs with aura. There will be nausea, vomiting, phonophobia, and photophobia. Common migraine, there may not be any aura, but the patient can have a throbbing headache with nausea. Aura is actually a kind of flicker or a zigzag feelings. I've been a migraine sufferer for so many years and I've really experienced it personally. I know what it is. And then comes the ophthalmoplegic migraine, in which headache is accompanied by any one of the ocular cranial nerve palsies and visual defects. So that forms the ophthalmoplegic migraine. And steroids are also indicated in the treatment of ophthalmoplegic migraine. Basilar migraine, in which migraine is associated with a central form of vertigo. And hemiplegic migraine, in which migraine can be associated with weakness of limbs, which are fully reversible. And sometimes there can be an alteration in vision. That's also fully reversible. So there are certain trigger factors of migraine. The key trigger factors being emotional stress, physical stress, dietary factors, environmental, and especially in ladies, hormonal, as migraine is always related to the hormonal cycle in ladies. The other trigger factors, usually allergy and migraine, they go hand in hand. And cocoa, cheese, red wine, and caffeinated drinks can be potent triggers of migraine. And stress, fatigue, smoking, and loud noises, perfumes, with strong odors, sleep deprivation. That's the most potent trigger factor for any type of migraine. And when do we initiate a preventive treatment for migraine in patients? If the headache are more than 2 days a week, very frequent occurrence. And if the patients cannot tolerate the medications used to treat acute attacks, and some patients will present with severe attacks lasting for more than 48 hours, completely incapacitating them, then actually there's an indication for prophylaxis. And complicated forms of migraine with neurological symptoms do need a proper migraine prophylaxis. And migraine prophylactic measures include, first thing, lifestyle modifications with trigger avoidance. And medications commonly used that all of us will be familiar with. We have flunitrazine, we have non-selective beta blockers, we have beta adrenergic receptor antagonists, and also antidepressants. In acute migraine, usually managed with analgesics, antiemetics, and serotonin agonists. And these are very commonly in use now, sumatriptan. And previously, we used to have ergot alkaloids for aborting acute attacks, and dihydroergotamine is also used. And we don't see this in practice much, but still botulinum type of toxin is also indicated in relief of a chronic migraine. And migraines are actually a genetic neurological disorder, not just headaches. It comes in the genes. So these are all newer therapeutic options, approved by FDA of late. So here we have the calcitonin gene-related peptide inhibitors. So these inhibitors inhibit a calcitonin gene-related peptide protein, which is very actively functioning in cases of migraine. So they have one advantage in that they do not vasoconstrict the vessels, unlike sumatriptan. So these drugs are very safe in patients who have had a cerebrovascular accident, who are prone to cardiovascular accidents. It's actually these kind of CGRP inhibitors are a boon to migraine sufferers with history of stroke or cardiovascular disease. And among these, usually this adalimumab, frunemizumab, and galcanezumab, they are given as prophylactic medications, and ibrogepant and rimegepant are used to abort acute attacks. And newer therapeutic devices like Cefali, which is a nerve stimulator that stops the migraine pathway. And then we have a spring TMS device, which is a magnetic device, and a gamma core device, which is used in cervicogenic migraine. So these are all medical devices, but they're not still much in clinical use, but they have proven some clinical efficacy. And that's about migraine. Now coming to the cluster headache. Cluster headache is classically more common in males. And even though it's common between 20 and 50 years of age, it can affect any age group persons. And alcohol is a very potent trigger of cluster headache. And the characteristic headache is usually unilateral, either orbital or supraorbital, which is accompanied by either a eyelid swelling, miosis, ptosis, lacrimation, and sweating on the ipsilateral side of forehead. So these are all classical signs and symptoms of a cluster headache. Cluster headache is effectively managed with triptans and calcium channel blockers, and systemic corticosteroids are rarely indicated, but actually they are proven to be effective. And trigeminal neuralgia. Again, this headache comes as a paroxysmal, sharp headache, a very brief headache, which is accompanied by asymptomatic periods. Usually the pain is a kind of a stabbing, shooting, or lancinating pain. Some patients may have an annoying burning sensation. Management is with carbamazepine and gabapentin. Sometimes percutaneous radiofrequency rhizotomy of the Gazerian ganglion or stereotactic radiotherapy can be advocated, and even microvascular decompression in refractory cases of trigeminal neuralgia. And coming to the headaches associated with vascular disorders, we have headaches due to subarachnoid hemorrhage and aneurysms. We have acute ischemic cerebrovascular disorder. We have arteritis like temporal arteritis and giant cell arteritis, and benign arterial hypertension, carotid and vertebral artery dissections. And subarachnoid hemorrhage, the onset of headache is usually very severe, excruciating, usually accompanied by a vomiting and focal neurological deficits. Sometimes, cranial nerve palsies can also happen. And intracerebral hemorrhage, again, it's a kind of excruciating pain. Usually the patient may present with seizures also. And aneurysmal headaches, usually they are identified either by a CT angiography, and a vessel wall MRI is especially useful in cases of ruptured aneurysms. CT angiography is extremely useful. A CT is more than 90% specific. Even if the aneurysms are as small, less than 3 millimeters, CT angiography can pick it up, and it has 100% specificity for aneurysms more than 4 mm. And we have headaches due to carotid and vertebral artery dissections, and classically they can be picked up by an MR angio or a carotid and vertebral Doppler. And usually the pain is excruciating, and the patients may have, it's usually the patients can have a painful tinnitus, and sometimes visual defects can also occur. And cerebral venous thrombosis. Again, the clinician should have a high index of suspicion to diagnose this condition. Headache is the most frequent and often the first symptom of a cerebral venous thrombosis. and papilledema, focal deficits, altered sensorium, cranial nerve palsies can happen. And the the common sinus that is involved will be the superior sagittal sinus. And headache can also be a part of a spontaneous or idiopathic series of leaks, in which the headache is a kind of a dull, diffuse headache, and the series of leak area can be identified through CT cystoscopy or myelography, and the series of pressure will be low in the sitting position. And then we have the empty cellular syndrome. It's a condition in which the pituitary shrinks, or gets flattened, which can be either a primary or secondary. In the case of primary, it's actually a congenital occurrence. And in cases of secondary empty cellular syndrome, either it could be caused by a surgery or a disease which damages that area. So the sella turcica is made to be filled with CSF. So sometimes, headaches can be associated with visual symptoms and memory loss. In this condition, patients can also have dizziness. Is most common in obese women, especially around the 4th decade. Then non-vascular causes of headache. So we have the intracranial infections and meningitis or encephalitis. Usually headache is accompanied by fever, neck stiffness, altered sensorium, photophobia, and headache worsens with eye movement. And usually there's no neurological deficit in cases of infections. So then comes the intracranial tumors or metastasis. So headache is reported by 47 to 71% of patients with intracranial tumors. If it's supratentorial, the headache is usually in the frontal region. If it's infratentorial, mostly it is in the occipital region and neck. And there are signs of increased intracranial pressure associated with the headache. Headaches can also be cervicogenic, in which a headache and facial pain is only a referred pain. So the pain may originate from the intervertebral disc, especially from the atlantoaxial joints and atlanto-occipital joints. And cervicogenic headache is always a referred headache. What are the red flags? We have the Snoop mnemonic. So when headache should alert a clinician. If headache is associated with systemic symptoms like fever, weight loss, then that's a danger sign. If there are associated neurological symptoms, signs, focal deficits, balance disorders like ataxia, numbness, hemiplegia, then, there should be a high degree of suspicion for a very serious underlying medical condition. And if the onset is like a thunderclap, okay, so this is a typical presentation of a subarachnoid hemorrhage, which is a real emergency. And if there is new headache after the age of 50, then also there's a strong suspicion of either a brain tumor or occurrence of a cerebrovascular accident or stroke. And headaches which are provocated by positions, when upright position, bending down, which is precipitated by exercise, again, it gives a clue to the intracranial pathology with raised intracranial tension. So to conclude, headache actually it's a symptom with a broad class of etiologies. So just because we have a broad class of etiologies, a clinician should have a systematic approach towards diagnosis. So a comprehensive history with a multidisciplinary approach, good clinical examination, appropriate investigations, all will lead us to determining the etiology. So these are all the key factors which will help us to ascertain the definite etiology. And appropriate diagnosis and timely intervention, both are crucial for successful management of headache. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Sudha. It's a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so
much. It's a comprehensive presentation. Now, if a patient comes with a headache, it's a red flag for the physician or the surgeon who's sitting there. And the most important point which you stress is that after 50 years, when a headache comes, it should alert the physician. That is one.
Exactly.
Secondly, these days, I've seen lots of patients in the clinic they come with severe headache, cold, and others. When they talk about the PCR or screening for COVID, they refuse. and invariably they land up as COVID patients in a couple of days.
Very true. Very true.
So any cold with severe one-sided headaches, we should always alert for COVID. These days, it's very common, and it's a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much.
Whenever we look at a headache, it should be more comprehensive than thinking about purely an ENT cause. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, let me introduce the second wonderful speaker, Dr. Senthil Vadivu. Dr. Senthil Vadivu is also known to me for many, many years. And as others said that Senthil, as Palniyappan sir said, that Senthil Vadivu is the wife of the famous Dr. Vijay Krishnan, who's running the whole show. And he's the man behind the thing. And Dr. Senthil Vadivu is a very unique in her specialization, that she's a consultant, yes, at Madras ENT Research Foundation, and she's got a particular certificate course in biostatistics and research methodology, which not many surgeons will do that. And she has done that, and she is an expert in it. The expertise I realized when she presented in one of the Tamil Nadu conferences, she's talked about the research methodology and the statistics. I was amazed by her talk. And if the people allow, definitely we can make a presentation on that. And she is an invited speaker on state, national, and international conferences, both in biostatistics and in cochlear implant. She's a wonderful speaker, with as authoritative as Sudha Maheshwari. And she has conducted an international course at cochlear implant at Manchester University, British Academy at Manchester University in UK. Not that she is alone biostatistics and research. She's also very good in cochlear implant. As Murph, they do a lot of cochlear implants, and all these people do lots of research, and they are experts, and they conduct international courses in so-called developed countries. That is a state of development at Madras ENT Research Foundation, and she's one of the experts in that. And her research papers, she has won lots of awards in different levels in AOI Trichy, Cochlear Implant Group of India, Asia Pacific region. Her research work and all her conferences, she has won a lot of awards, and that adds a feather to her cap. And she's, as I told you, that she's very good in biostatistics and research methodology. She's an expert in it. She's an authority in that. She's a reviewer in many reputed journals, and without her knowledge, nobody can publish. So we have to get into good books of Vadivu, so that if you need any publications or your thesis to be approved and any journal, then you have to be very friendly with Vadivu, so otherwise your journals will not be approved. And she has won a cochlear implant group of best research work. She's done lots of research in cochlear implant, like Sudha Maheshwari, and she has won an award for that from the Cochlear Implant Group of India. And she's now that she's into biostatistics and research, she's done lots of publications. Because she's an authority, she can write papers within minutes. So she's got more than 40 publications in reputed national and international journals. Thank you, Vadivu. Thank you for accepting. Now it's the mic to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
1 minute before giving that, sir, I want all the senior persons like Venugopal sir, Jnanathilayan sir, IMA president, all of them to give the Vadivu the shield, the certificate, and the medal for accepting this great oration of Dr. Anandagiri. Anandagiri is nothing but Dr. Venugopal sir's father, and it's a great honor for his father, and it's a great honor for Vadivu to present Dr. Anandagiri's oration. Thank you, Vadivu. Thank you. Go on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody, for the kind invite. I'm very happy to deliver this endowment lecture.
What?
It's a pleasure to meet all of you here, senior ENT surgeons, and Dr. Anandagiri. Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir.
You're audible.
Dr. Anandagiri is the first ENT surgeon of Trichy, and he is the founder member of AOI. In 1945, there are only 40 members. He is one of them. And first ENT nursing home in Trichy was started by Dr. Anandagiri, and he is a classmate of first ENT director, Professor Satya Narayana, in Institute of ENT at Madras Medical College. and he is 5 years senior to our senior Professor Kameshwaran sir. And I'm very happy to deliver his endowment lecture. And thank you all for giving me this opportunity to deliver this lecture. Before starting this lecture, I would like to say a Tirukural. Tupparku tuppaya tuppaki tupparku tuppaya thuvum. So you may wonder what is the connection between this Tirukural and this lecture. Actually, nothing. It's not connected. It will be an excellent if you know the meaning of this Tirukural. Otherwise, every word sounds similar. The same way, if you could understand the nuances, then managing dizziness is simple. Otherwise, everything will be same. So that is the connection. And one of my friends used to say, at the clinic closing time, if you get a patient with headache or giddiness, we will also experience the same. It's true. So this lecture gives a bird's eye view about varied etiologies. The treating doctor should be able to decide when to refer and whom to refer. I've tried my best to do justification to this aspect. So to start the lecture, this is a practical approach in managing a dizzy patient, a diagnostic dilemma. Vertigo is a subjective sense of imbalance in which there is a relative motion between the subject and his environment. The toll of dizziness is a chief complaint in 5% of walk-in clinic visits and is the third most common complaint in medical OPDs. In acute care setting, a chief complaint of dizziness accounts for less than or equal to 4% in emergency rooms. It affects at least 10% of those over 65 years of age, and it ranges from 20 to 35%. Women of all ages are affected. It results from when there is a mismatch between information about spatial orientation received from labyrinth with the information received from other sensory systems due to defect anywhere along the pathway. So these are the various inputs: vision, proprioception, labyrinthine activity, and it will control the activities of oculomotor, posture, and motor skill. The cerebellum and reticular formation is essential for maintaining the balance, and the cerebral cortex should be awareness about the head and body position and motion. The various etiology of dizziness. To start with is a labyrinthine etiology. Next is the central nervous system, psychological, orthopedic, autoimmune, renal, endocrine, hematological, genetic, cardiovascular, and ocular lesions. So varied etiologies are there. So how to go about it? So good history and clinical examination is a key to diagnosis in vertigo, especially in dizziness patient. First, to know whether is it a true vertigo or a dizziness or an unsteadiness. Is it a central or peripheral? Is it episodic or continuous? Is it related to posture, the duration and frequency of attacks, a precipitating and relieving factors? And other histories such as audiological histories such like hard of hearing, oral fullness, tinnitus, and ear discharge, and central nervous system like motor and sensory disturbances, headache, diplopia, dysarthria, visual disturbances, seizures, and vomiting, like all cerebellar signs. And cardiovascular, if you have any dyspnea, palpitation, or sweating, and any other medical history such as diabetes, anemia, and cardiac problems, and psychological history. Clinical evaluation. To start with, as an ENT surgeon, I would like to examine the ear first, inspection of the tympanic membrane, evaluation of hearing with tuning fork test, and look for spontaneous nystagmus, and we will do a positional test, bedside positional test. We can do a head thrust test, and hints is head impulse with nystagmus and test for Q. And we can look for the equality of carotids on both sides, and we have to check the blood pressure. And a cranial nerve examination has to be done, a gross assessment of visual field, pupil examination, extraocular movements, facial sensation, motor and sensory function, and gait has to be assessed. A neurootologic evaluation for vestibulo-ocular and vestibulospinal function can be done with a Romberg's test and Unterberger's test. After taking a complete history and doing a clinical evaluation, we should be able to find out whether this patient belongs to our specialty or should we have to refer to some other specialty people. So to go about that, we have to classify whether the vertigo is a true vertigo, that is spinning sensation. If it is a spinning sensation, it may be a vestibular cause. It will be peripheral or central vertigo. If it is a pre-syncope, that is near fainting sensation, that is due to decreased perfusion, and usually it will be the reasons are cardiac or autonomic. And if it is a disequilibrium, that is just an unsteadiness, that's due to proprioceptive dysfunction, usually due to ataxia, some problems in basal ganglia, myelopathies, neuropathies, and some vague sensation, some people may say, some dizziness, that is due to psychological causes, drugs, hypoglycemia, pregnancy, or thyroid disorders. So when we evaluate a dizzy patient, this is the flow chart to go about, whether it is a true vertigo or others. So in a true vertigo, whether the neurological symptoms is present or absent. If the neurological symptoms is present, whether there is a patient has any head injury history, straight away refer to the neuro person. If there is no head injury, we have to ask for a history of fever. If there is fever is there may be due to CNS infection may be there. If there is no fever, and we can take a CT scan. In the CT scan, if it is normal, it may be a basilar migraine. And if the CT is abnormal, we can find what is the etiology based on the abnormality in the CT, such as tumor, infarct, bleedings, and vertebrobasilar insufficiency reasons we can see. If there is no neurological symptoms, we are examining the ear. If the tympanic membrane is abnormal, we can see whether any cholesteatoma is there. That may also cause a giddiness. And if the tympanic membrane is normal, we have to correlate with the history, ear symptoms present or not. If ear symptom is present, it may be due to Meniere's disease or labyrinthitis. And there is no ear symptoms based on positional test positive, it will be a BPPV, and positional test negative is a vestibular neuronitis. So based on the history and clinical examination itself, we can try to find out the causes, basic reasons among the autological reasons of vertigo. Some neuro reasons we need to do a CT scan. So the other causes, if we see the vitals, if it is normal or abnormal. Vitals abnormal, it may be due to dehydration, sepsis, etc. And vitals are normal, we have to see for the cardiac symptoms. And whether it is present, we have to send for the cardiologist. And no cardiac symptoms and dizziness on standing, it may be due to orthostatic hypotension or pregnancy. And other causes I have already mentioned, such as drugs, thyroid, diabetes, anemia, or psychological. So based on the accompanying symptoms, we may reach into the system which we are dealing with. So along with the dizziness, there is a hearing loss and tinnitus. It may be a cochlear or eighth nerve disorder. If along with vertigo, if we have a brainstem or cerebellar signs, it will be neurological. If we have a GI palpitation, breathlessness, and angina, it may be due to cardiovascular, thyrotoxicosis, diabetes, anemia, etc. And based on the episode of vertigo, we can also come to a conclude diagnosis. If it is a single episode, it may be due to labyrinthitis. If it is constantly present, it may be due to neurological disorders or psychological. And if it is multiple, when it is lasting for a few seconds, it may be BPPV, vertebrobasilar insufficiency, or arrhythmias. If it is lasting for hours, it is migraine or Meniere's disease. And if it is lasting for days, it may be a decompensated labyrinthitis. So this is a flow chart to go about how to deal with a dizzy patient and when to refer and whom to refer. So a peripheral vertigo is an unprecipitated, short-lived episodes of vertigo associated with nausea, vomiting, and otological symptoms. And central, it accounts only for less than 10%. It's more insidious and protracted and often associated with a gait and steadiness. Usually, it will be associated with cerebellar symptoms. So when we see the central vertigo and peripheral vertigo difference, the imbalance is more severe in a central vertigo and it will be mild to moderate in a peripheral thing. The neurological symptoms are present in central vertigo. It is rare in peripheral. And the nystagmus changes direction in different gaze position. In peripheral vertigo, it is unidirectional in all gaze positions. Hearing loss is rare in central vertigo and it is frequently associated in peripheral vertigo. Nausea is variable, but it is severe in peripheral vertigo. And recovery by central compensation is slow in central vertigo, and it is rapid in peripheral. So when we see the nystagmus, if it is a central origin, it changes direction in different gaze position, whereas peripheral nystagmus is unidirectional in both the gaze positions. When we go about investigations, the basic audiological investigations are pure tone, impedance, OEE, and BERA. And at hematological, we can do a general checkup like complete hemogram, glucose levels, thyroid function test, lipid profile, VDRL, and HIV. If we go for a vestibular function test, there are various vestibular function tests available. The basic things, electron-histography. The next is video oculography and video head impulse test, craniocarpography, computerized dynamic posturography, and some rotational tests, which we are not doing regularly. And monitoring the electrical activity can be done with electrocochleography, vestibular evoked myogenic potential, and vestibular evoked potentials, and brain electrical activity mapping. So when we see the video oculography, it assesses the vestibulo-ocular reflex. Caloric test assesses the horizontal semicircular canal and superior branch of the vestibular nerve. This does not assess the vestibulospinal system. And seeing the computerized dynamic posturography, it is a series of vestibulospinal tests which help in postural assessment. This measures the influence of each component involved in the balance process by assessing the patient's ability to stand in situations of increasing difficulty. That means the patient is asked to step and patient is asked to close the eyes so that the inputs from the other sensory thing is cut off and then the test is done. And the video head impulse test is an instrumented bedside technique used to diagnose reduction in vestibular function in one ear versus the other. An examiner abruptly accelerates and then decelerates the head, moving the head rapidly at high speed and then stopping it. Craniocarpography assesses the vestibulospinal system. It's a photographic recording of head and body movement while testing the gait. Romberg's test and Unterberger's test are done while doing this. An electrocochleography is a technique of recording electrical potentials generated in the inner ear and auditory nerve in response to sound stimulation using an electrode placed in the ear canal or tympanic membrane. We will see the cochlear microphonic action potential and summating potential. And that VEMP is a vestibular evoked myogenic potential. It's a sound evoked muscle reflex or sonomotor response that can be recorded using evoked potential techniques by acoustic stimulation of the saccule. Then be cervical VEMP and ocular VEMP. Cervical VEMP tests the saccule, ocular VEMP tests the utricle. When to emergently image a patient with acute vertigo. If the patient is having unilateral or asymmetrical hearing loss, if the patient is having brainstem or cerebellar symptoms, risk factors for stroke such as diabetes, hypertension, MI, etc., acute onset with neck pain, direction changing spontaneous nystagmus, and new onset severe headache, inability to stand or walk. In these conditions, we have to image the patient emergently. So when we come across the common causes of peripheral vertigo, vertigo with a hearing impairment and vertigo without hearing impairment. With hearing impairment, we see Meniere's disease, CSOM, labyrinthitis, and otosclerosis. And without hearing impairment, it is BPPV and vestibular neuritis. BPPV is the most common cause for the peripheral vertigo. There will be a torsional or linear rotatory nystagmus of 1 to 5 second latency, and brief duration, that is 5 to 30 seconds, and there will be fatigability will be there in the positional BPPV nystagmus. It is the commonest cause of peripheral vertigo, and the maneuver to diagnose BPPV is the Dick-Scalpike maneuver for posterior semicircular canal, and the corrective maneuver is the Epley's maneuver. And for lateral canal, it is the supine roll test, and the corrective maneuver is barbecue maneuver. We have videos for demonstrating all these things. And a positional nystagmus with a central origin, the nystagmus will not have any latency. The duration will be more than 60 seconds, and there will not be any fatigability. It will be with the changing intensity and change of direction. There will be cerebellar and oculomotor findings. Meniere's disease is the second common cause of peripheral vertigo. There will be an acute otrative vertigo combined with nausea, vomiting, and anxiety. And vertigo typically lasts for 20 minutes to 24 hours. It will be episodic. Unilateral low-tone fluctuant hearing loss will be there. Tinnitus and oral fullness will be there. It's due to overproduction or malabsorption of endolymph, resulting in endolymphatic hair drops. There will be spontaneous remissions and exacerbations. Bilateral involvement is common in 30 to 60% of patients. This is a low frequency hearing loss in PTA. The management is with a salt-restricted diet and drugs such as diuretics, vestibular suppressant, vasodilators, steroids either systemic or intratympanic, and intratympanic gentamicin. Surgery, the choices are labyrinthectomy, endolymphatic sac surgery, and vestibular nerve section can be done. Some devices to alleviate the tinnitus or hearing aid can be used, even cochlear implant can be done. And there is a device called Maynard device and also vestibular implants. The next comes the vestibular neuritis. It's an uncommon but acute onset prolonged severe rotatory vertigo will be there. Spontaneous horizontal rotatory nystagmus will be there, and postural imbalance and nausea will be there. Etiology is due to viral infection of the superior vestibular nerve. The spontaneous recovery within 1 to 6 weeks of time, and treatment is with anti-vertiginous drugs, benzodiazepines, steroids, and vestibular exercises. The vestibular rehabilitation therapy, or VRT, this expedites central compensatory mechanism by increasing the sensory conflicts. The mismatch of sensory inputs to the vestibular system caused by body, head, and eye movements using exercises devised by Cawthon and Kukasi initially and modified later by Brandroff. Labyrinthitis is characterized by vertigo and hearing loss. It is differentiated from vestibular neuritis by the presence of cochlear symptoms in addition to vestibular compliance. Superior semicircular canal dehiscence. It will cause a chronic unsteadiness. The Tullio phenomenon is the vertigo induced by loud sounds, and Henneberg sign is vertigo induced by pressure. There will be pulsatile tinnitus, hearing loss, autophony, and hypersensitivity to bone conducted sounds. Other otological conditions with vertigo are perilimb fistula, otosclerosis, ototoxicity, autoimmune inner ear disease, enlarged vestibular aqueduct syndrome, and vascular compression of eighth nerve. Next comes the central vestibular disorders. Less than 10% of the patients presenting with vertigo have central nervous system pathology. Most central vestibular pathology is located in the posterior cranial fossa because major portion of the vestibular pathway are located there in the brainstem and cerebellum. There will be a constant feeling of unsteadiness. These are the various etiologies for central vertigo. It will be a vascular cause, that is cerebrovascular diseases, vertebrobasilar insufficiency, Wallenberg syndrome, that is posterior inferior cerebellar artery will be involved, migraine, or inflammatory, there will be encephalitis, demyelination due to multiple sclerosis, neoplastic is acoustic neuroma, congenital we may have a Chiari malformation, and degenerative we may have some familial ataxia, traumatic is head trauma, etc. I'm sorry. In stroke, majority are ischemic. Dizziness is the most common posterior ischemic symptom occurring in about half of all cases and 70% of those with cerebellar involvement.
The only hemorrhagic stroke commonly associated with dizziness is cerebellar hemorrhage, representing about 10% of intracerebral hemorrhages. The brain tumors. CP angle tumors common is the vestibular schwannoma, infratemporal brain tumors involving the cerebellum or brainstem. In vestibular schwannoma, vertigo will be seen in less than 1/5 of patients in small size, and if with increase in size, the vertigo will be increasing. In more than 3 centimeters, 3/4 of the patients will have the disequilibrium. In intracranial complications of otitic infections, such as abscess in extradural or subdural spaces, and those in the temporal lobe or cerebellum, can also cause vestibular complaints. And migraine as vertigo is one of the common cause for the vertigo, and 10 to 25% of patients with migraine can have vertigo spells. The criteria for migrainous vertigo is it should be recurrent, and migrainous headache should be there, like a one-sided headache with pulsating quality, and one of the following symptoms should be there, that is visual aura, phonophobia should be associated in 2 of the attacks, and other causes should be ruled out. Basilar migraine is a central form of vertigo. The aura symptoms originate from the brainstem or from both occipital lobes. Other symptoms include headache, visual disturbance, hearing loss, diplopia, tinnitus, ataxia, bilateral numbness, tingling in extremities and mouth, confusion and disorientation, rarely unconsciousness. Multiple sclerosis. The onset is usually 3rd and 4th decade of life. There will be internuclear ophthalmoplegia and horizontal gaze palsy will be there. Optic neuritis is there. Lermit sign will be positive. Vibratory loss, spasticity, and sensitivity to temperature may be there. In MRI, there will be a plaque which may involve the vestibular nuclei or 8th nerve root entry zone. The clinical features may be similar to vestibular neuritis, Meniere's disease, BPPV, or central vertigo. The other cardiovascular causes are orthostatic hypotension, arrhythmia, MI, and carotid artery stenosis. So to conclude, vertigo poses several challenges in its diagnosis and management, and there is no substitute for thorough history taking and clinical evaluation. And newer diagnostic modalities and treatment strategies, as well as a more rational approach to pharmacotherapy and VRT, have all resulted in a better patient care. And before I conclude, I would like to say a few case scenarios which I have come across in my OPD. One patient, a 25-year-old patient, she had come with a recurrent episodes of BPPV. And after correcting maneuver also, she has had that recurrent episodes. So when we evaluated, she had multiple sclerosis. And we referred to the neuro people early, and they said, though multiple sclerosis has a poor prognosis, since she was referred early, we could initiate treatment. One other patient has typical that unsteady gait. And she used to say that while walking, it is just, she's feeling like pushy sensation. And when we evaluated, she had a posterior cranial fossa arachnoid cyst. And we have referred to a neurosurgeon, and she was corrected for that. She was treated for that. And we have one other patient with acoustic neuroma also. So the clinical history and examination and cross-reference, and especially we had one patient who came with giddiness and headache. Just as a routine examination, we have checked the BP, and BP seems to be 240, 120. Immediately, we have referred to the cardiologist, and the patient had an evolving stroke. So they have managed it successfully. So the basic clinical examination and a good history is very essential, and timely referral to concerned specialty is important in managing vertigo, dizziness especially. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vadivu. It was a wonderful presentation with a very comprehensive presentation covering all the departments. And as she said, vertigo should not be taken for granted. We have to look into different aspects of it, why it is coming back, what is the reason, anything outside ENT or any other specialty involved, all the four cases which you said was very, very informative. And it's a very good take-home message that vertigo should be taken very seriously, not by just prescribing drugs. We have to think why it is coming and what is the reason for it, and to treat that with multidisciplinary approach involving the other specialties also. Thank you very much. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I think both the lectures went on very well. Now I would request Dr. Nyanathilagan, sir, to say vote of thanks.
Thank you. President of Indian Medical Association, Tiruchirappalli, my good friend Dr. Gunasekharan, Secretary Dr. Sendilvel Kumar, President of Association of Otolaryngologists of India, Tiruchirappalli branch, Dr. Venugopal, Secretary, the dynamic secretary of our branch, Dr. Jawahar Nagasundaram, guest speakers, Dr. Sudha Mageswari from Dr. Mohan Kameswaran's MURF, that is and Dr. Sendil Vadivu, both of them from MURF. For this, I must thank Dr. Vijay Krishnan and Dr. Mohan also. And the undergraduate students who got medal also. I thank them and their parents and members of the IMA, Indian Medical Association, and my ENT colleagues and ladies and gentlemen.
Palniappan.
Dr. Palniappan also. First of all, I must thank the IMA for giving us the opportunity to have a combined meeting. That was the first time I arranged, about 5 years back. I arranged with the IMA so that these endowments, so that we can have a good crowd, and it will be very useful for
both
also. Now it is continuing. I must thank Dr. Devar for arranging. Only 5 days back, Dr. Ashraf told that you must have a combined meeting this October. Usually, you only ask for a combined meeting in October. So I have already given. Dr. Gunasekharan also said. So immediately I said, Dr. Jawahar immediately arranged. Within 5 days, he is able to arrange the 2 speakers, very good speakers. That is because of Dr. Vijay Krishnan. I must thank him. Thank Dr. Vijay Krishnan for arranging this very wonderful lecture by these 2 people. Then I must thank Dr. Sudha Mageswari and Dr. Sendil Vadivu for giving an excellent lecture. That is, it in simple way, the IMA members also could understand what is headache and what is dizziness also. You know that dizziness, make people, everybody dizziness, but in spite of that, she has explained so nicely, and we are very happy that all the people were, could understand, and it will be very useful for them. At this moment, I would like to thank for another reason. That is, I was admitted last month in a serious condition, and my wife also.
Yes.
I must thank especially, most of them said, I'm almost gone. Dr. Dominic, I must thank Dr. Dominic, Dr. Ashraf, Dr. Gunasekharan, and Sendil Vel for arranging plasma. They are going more than 5 bottles, I think. And because of that, I was able to come here in front of you and give the vote of thanks. From my bottom of my heart, I thank all these people who helped me, who offered prayers for me. And I also thank, and I will not forget in my lifetime. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I must thank Pearl, who has sponsored this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you.